Now, from Wish TV, your local news source, this is All Indiana Politics.
Good morning and welcome to All Indiana Politics. I'm Garrett Bergquist in for Phil Sanchez. We begin by talking politics and the Olympics. The opening ceremonies happened Friday morning in Beijing. The U.S. has an official diplomatic boycott on the games, but Indiana Senator Todd Young says that doesn't go far enough and wants the world to talk about China's human rights abuses. And joining us now is Senator Todd Young. Senator, thank you for being here. With the Winter Olympics now getting underway and you're continuing your Beijing Behaving Badly campaign, how has the reaction been to that so far?
Well, thank you, Garrett. I think there's a broad understanding that in conjunction with cheering on our athletes, we need to use this opportunity of the Winter Olympic Games to highlight the gross human rights abuses we've seen from Xi Jinping and the Chinese Communist Party, which is what I've done through my social media campaign, hashtag Beijing Behaving Badly. And a lot of people have really taken interest in and asked me follow-up questions about their censoring of the internet, their enslavement of Uyghur Muslims, and the utilization of that labor to produce Olympic gear. Their gathering of data from Olympic athletes is a real concern. Their suppression of journalists. All these things underscore that this is not a normal sort of Olympics, and we need to put some context around what otherwise are friendly competitions.
On the topic of the Supreme Court, what do you make of some of the names that have been floated so far as potential nominees? Do they fit the criteria you've laid out?
Well, I'm actually waiting for the president to finalize his selection. At that point, I'll really start kicking the tires of a nominee and making sure that they have the background, the temperament, and the judicial approach to really faithfully apply our Constitution to a particular case.
So at this point, you're saying you are neither a hard no nor a hard yes. Is that correct?
Listen, I wouldn't be 100% candid with the people of Indiana if I didn't say I was skeptical that Joe Biden was going to produce someone who understands their role, is not to legislate from the bench, but instead to just be faithful to the Constitution. But I'll give this person a fair look. And if they meet that high bar, they'll have my support.
Turning to foreign policy, U.S. Special Operations Forces have killed the leader of the Islamic State group. Do you see that having any sort of impact on that group's resurgence in Syria at the moment?
Well, I commend our brave men and women who were responsible for this operation, and let this be a warning to other terrorist leaders around the world that the United States cannot rest, we will not rest, as we continue to pivot our military focus towards the Indo-Pacific and China. We have to stay resolute in protecting our homeland from other terrorists. I think the administration should go further here in Syria, though. It remains an outlaw regime. There are Caesar sanctions. These are sanctions under the law that can be imposed on those brutal men and women who surround their leader Assad, and we should go ahead and apply those sanctions immediately to send a message to other would-be dictators around the world that the United States is still maintaining some semblance of order in these terrorist havens.
What do you make of the president's decision to send a small number of U.S. troops to Poland and Germany? Do you believe that's a wise move in the face of Russian activities over there? And how do we de-escalate the situation without completely abandoning Ukraine?
I do think it's a wise move. Let's remember that Poland and Romania, among the countries who are welcoming our troops, they are NATO allies. And so we have a treaty commitment with them to defend them, just as after 9/11. They sent troops to defend our homeland by countering those terrorist elements. So we are treaty allies, and it's really important. But we need to go further, continuing to send lethal aid to the Ukrainian government and the Ukrainian military, And we really need to be able to get our allies like Germany and France to the table to apply further pressure against Vladimir Putin. It's only by achieving that latter goal that I think we have a strong opportunity to deter Vladimir Putin.
How likely is it that this does break out into a large-scale armed conflict? We've seen certainly a low-intensity conflict since 2014, but what do you see as the chances that this escalates much further?
I would say it's a very serious and significant risk at this point, which is why we still have a lot of work to do, and it must be done to deter Vladimir Putin. We're not there yet, and that's why this administration needs to show strength, especially in the wake of the botched withdrawal from Afghanistan. We need to reassure our friends and our adversaries alike that the United States is not going away. We are prepared to do what it takes to deter Vladimir Putin.
Senator Todd Young, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
And coming up, we're halfway through the legislative session. We hear from the lawmakers who could decide the fate of everything from your employer's vaccine rules to your children's school curriculum. Welcome back. All eyes are now on the Indiana Senate as lawmakers get ready for the second half of session. That chamber has to figure out what to do with a pile of controversial bills from the House. Here's what some of the leaders in each chamber had to say this week. What are your plans with regard to the education bill in particular, considering that SB 167 is already put on ice?
So as I've said before, with regard to 1134, we've been looking at that. I know we have a couple of people that have been working really hard on what I would say are pretty significant amendments. And once we see what those are, they're not ready yet, so I can't really speak to them. I can't speak to them. But once we have an opportunity to look at those, we'll analyze it and see if there's a path forward.
We're in for, I believe, a very tumultuous second half with 1134 and other bills that are coming over here. Hopefully those bills will get a different look here in the Senate. I think we seem to be a little bit more pragmatic about the things that we discuss here. There's time for us to get some things together for kitchen table issues.
Lawmakers also are working on a legal path out of Indiana's COVID emergency regulations. A big question is whether to couple that with a ban on employer vaccine mandates.
We're hopeful that Senate Bill 3, which is the emergency orders piece, will move through the House relatively quickly. We'll see, and that is part of 1001 as well. We're gonna take that. We feel like we've handled the emergency orders piece of it fairly well. Did not deal, as you know, with the vaccine mandate piece in the first half of session. So we'll begin to take that and process it and pick up where we left off back in November when we started to discuss it. Cannot tell you at this point where it ends.
Democrats say there's little appetite in the Senate for vaccine mandate bans.
I see that bill not being successful over here.
Why?
I think it's very clear that private businesses have the authority to do what they want to regulate their workplace. We have bills all the time that has to do with people having the ability. As a matter of fact, we passed a bill today that said you can point a gun at someone if your workplace is being disrupted. This is another type of legislation that I believe goes too far. And you saw what happened this summer. When we started down that road, it was the Senate that I believe stopped the bill from having stopped us from going forward with that legislation.
We'll have the conversations. They think what they send over is very important, and we think what we send over is very important. And we'll work together to to communicate why we pass what we pass, and they pass what they pass.
We'll see, how what they think as they listen to hearing and discussions, and who knows, there could be changes and may come back to us. We may have to go to conference committee and discuss those again later in the session. But I know there was some concern, apprehension on the part of the Senate to act on some of these bills that we've been sending over.
The second half of session kicks off tomorrow. Lawmakers must adjourn no later than March 14th, and leaders in both chambers say they want to wrap up before then. Coming up, we ask our panel what they think we can expect from lawmakers in the second half. That's next on All Indiana Politics. Welcome back to All Indiana Politics as we welcome back Indiana Democratic Party Communications Director Drew Anderson and Republican political strategist Allie Bartlett. Thank you both for joining us today.
Howdy.
And Allie, we'll start with you. The Senate appears hesitant to take up the school curriculum debate. Given that, how likely is it the bill reaches the finish line at all or in any recognizable form?
I think that's a good question. Obviously, the Senate and the House are different chambers, but as you'll recall, the Senate did start a bill with similar content at the beginning of the year, and it's not unusual for them to only take up one of the two bills that start that way. So I don't think we can really read too much into that. I think, they're going to take it up for debate. How it comes out will remain to be seen, but I have faith that it's going to get to a good middle ground.
Drew, how does this focus on culture war issues affect the chances for bipartisan cooperation on other issues?
I mean, at the end of the day, Garrett, the Indiana Republican Party is becoming the culture war party. And we are seeing that in this session. And House Bill 1134, along with its former companion, Senate Bill 167, all it does is attack teachers, politicizes schools and the classrooms. And honestly, I have educator friends who have said that if this law passes, they are leaving the industry. And we already have a teacher shortage. Why are Republicans prioritizing legislation that divides our communities? And that's what they're doing this session.
Yeah. Allie, I'll give you a chance to respond.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say the complete opposite, that this legislation is an attempt to ensure that there is less divisiveness in the school setting and in life in general. That's what we're looking to do here. We're looking to ensure that divisive material is not a part of curriculum that our kids are learning in their classrooms every day. This is not an anti-teacher bill. This is a bill that supports parents and their right to have a say in their kids' education. That's the bottom line.
I mean, asking teachers to teach Nazism impartially, which was the original bill of the Senate side, that's a problem. And the Republican Party is pushing that culture war.
That's an intense statement, and that is not at all true. Please go and read the bill. This has nothing to do with dictating curriculum. This has everything to do with creating transparency so that parents can have a say in what
Scott Baldwin said it himself.
Because the problem is that we have now created a culture where it's okay for teachers to talk about these types of divisive issues in the classroom, and that's what we are trying to avoid. We want parents to have a say in what their children are learning so that they can at least be involved and have a chance to discuss with teachers what their kids are learning, and there's no problem with creating a new avenue for transparency. You're absolutely right. There is a teacher shortage, and that's a lot in part, and it's really
because of Republicans. It's the Republicans politicizing schools.
Allie and Drew, we have to move on here. As we heard earlier, lawmakers are working on a legislative way out of the pandemic emergency orders. The House wants to combine this with a ban on employer vaccine mandates. The Senate so far has treated those as separate issues. Drew, is it wise for lawmakers to try to essentially add a poison pill to the regulatory bill Governor Holcomb has called for?
The Indiana Chamber of Commerce is against House Bill 1001. The Republican Party has discredited the vaccine that's led to Indiana actually seeing death rates as being the third highest in the nation. And what the Republicans should do is to drop House Bill 1001, move forward with their Senate version, and actually fit what Governor Holcomb is asking for so we can all collectively start moving on from this pandemic. The rescue plan started it, and let's all work together on this.
Allie, do we run the risk that we tie the state's hands if a new, deadlier variant of COVID emerges or if we have a future pandemic?
We're not tying anyone's hands with this measure. And first and foremost, it's irresponsible to say that the Indiana Republican Party has ever discredited vaccines. They have never done so. They've always promoted the vaccine responsibly.
Todd Rokita does.
It's also false to say that House Bill 1001 implements any sort of mandate, because all it does is it requires employers to honor exemptions. That is not an additional mandate. It does not tie anyone's hands. It requires employers to honor valid exemptions for the vaccine. That's it.
If Indiana's business community is against it, and if Todd Rokita, like he did last month, even questioned Governor Holcomb's own numbers from the state, there's a problem within the Indiana Republican Party.
Questioning numbers does not have anything to do with discrediting a vaccine, number one. Number two, Todd Rokita is not.
So you're actually agreeing with Todd Rokita. Okay.
And number three, honoring exemptions is completely different than implementing additional mandates. That's not what we're doing here. So there's absolutely nothing that you just said is factual at all. And
So
by the
you
way,
agree with Todd Rokita and that the numbers are being fudged.
The entire
Got you.
Indiana business community.
All right, let's move on here. Let's shift over to the Senate side of things. Now, the Senate has prioritized crime in this session. Indianapolis, of course, had a record 271 homicides last year. Now, among other things, the Senate is pushing tighter regulations on nonprofit bail organizations. Allie, will restricting nonprofit bail actually lead to an appreciable drop in crime?
You know, I hope that it's a step in the right direction. At this point, that's all we can do. We have seen these crime rates grow out of control. And that was, you know, the inspiration behind this bill was that for the second time in 3 months, there was a suspect that was released on bail paid by a nonprofit organization that resulted in a murder. That's unacceptable. So whether or not it will result in any tangible or significant drop, I mean, we can't guess that, but taking any step in the right direction to see a reduction in crime in our state is important at this point, and particularly in Marion County. I mean, it has really just grown out of control, and I don't know how anyone could be satisfied not taking this necessary step.
And Drew, shouldn't there be some regulations since we already govern for-profit bail?
Oh, I agree. I think at the end of the day, these organizations need to be held accountable. We need to fine-tune the process, and it actually exposes an actual inequitable problem here, which is rich people sometimes are able to reach bail and get out, while poor folks have to, don't have that luxury. But at the end of the day, to piggyback off what Allie has said, we agree. Democrats agree. We're ready to take care of the crime epidemic that's happening across the country. And that's why with the rescue plan dollars, we're super funding an all-around approach to fight crime in Marion County. And we're ready to make sure that we can make our community safe and our county safe and our state safe. And that's why we're excited to get to work.
I want to turn to the latest jobs report. Almost 500,000 jobs added for the month of January, a very, very slight uptick in the unemployment rate to an even 4%. Labor force participation at a post-pandemic high, but both of those numbers are weaker than before the pandemic and continue trajectories that were underway before President Biden took office. Drew, does this mean the American Recovery Plan Act was a waste of money, as some have argued?
It's not, and it's because we've created over 7 million jobs in 2021. It's the fastest rebound in U.S. history. And at the end of the day, the American Rescue Plan is providing those long-term investments that are creating jobs across the state. And it's an issue that Democrats, we're going to be excited to campaign on. We're actually announced our jobs tour across the state, and we're going to be going to Fort Wayne, Indianapolis, and Terre Haute next week to tout how Democrats are creating this economic future for the state.
Allie, shouldn't there be some support still for retail businesses in particular, since so much of our economy depends on them?
Absolutely. And while I think it's a great credit to the American people for moving forward and out of this pandemic and out of these archaic mandates that jobs are being created, I think it's a problem that we're seeing the unemployment rate still tick up, because that means we're creating jobs but people aren't filling them. We're also seeing a huge problem with the fact that there is a slight increase in payroll, but it's still not catching up with inflation. So that means that these small business owners and even large business owners are still going to see problems related to inflation, which is still going to result in problems related to spending, and it's still going to result in people not having jobs, and that's just going to be an ongoing issue.
Drew, we got about 20 seconds to give you a chance to respond.
I will say that the slight tick up in the unemployment rate means that Americans are looking for work, and those jobs that are available are Democratic created jobs, and they're going to be Hoosiers are going to get back to work. And at the end of the day, the Republicans, they can't try to claim any moral victories here, because the economic success of the country is directly related to the economic success of the state. And if Republicans are going to
Drew and Fred will have to leave it there. Drew and Allie, thank you for joining us. We'll be back in a moment.
Take all Indiana politics on the go with you. Download our podcast now. Part of the All Indiana Podcast Network and allindianapodcastnetwork.com.
Thank you for joining us for All Indiana Politics. We'll be back here next Sunday morning at 9:30. You can also find our brand new All Indiana Politics podcast as part of the All Indiana Podcast Network at wishtv.com. Have a great rest of your weekend.